What is up, grinders? Welcome to an MMA crunch time before lock for Dawson versus Green at the Apex. 1 week off, Squirrel. We had one finally. I feel like that's a real rare occasion now for us. But now we go on another stretch of a bunch of mediocre cards. They're stacking the big, pay-per-view cards. But I will say, this particular slate, it's kind of tricky, man. There's many ways you can go, and then everybody's favorite, the middle range, is gold.
Yeah, so it's a card. It's happening. It's better than the one last Saturday. Uh, but no, yeah, no. I think you said it. We've got some huge events coming up. This is maybe not one of them, but it is. There's money to be made out there in the DFS tournaments, no matter what. So it is. We got three guys up top that are really expensive, have really strong odds. That makes the very bottom range, fairly weak. And yeah, then there's a whole lot of stuff in the middle, and we did have one fight cancellation, not at weigh-ins, but earlier in the week, I guess, and so that does actually even kind of accentuate the gap because there's a salary gap there where we would have had Gutierrez and Montel Jackson. So that really makes the three expensive guys kind of stand out even more. So you've got to make some choices. Again, I think the middle range will be popular.
Yeah, as it probably should be popular because you get some different dynamics in that particular region. Some money line, you got some inside the distance, you got some action fights. I mean, I think in the expert survey, I said there's really no fight you can really truly fade on this slate. I mean, there's some obvious ones that, you look at the Carolina and Diana Belbita fight, that organically people are not going to want to go there. But listen, even that fight could have a zillion significant strikes and actually score pretty well because of their price tags. And, I'm living in the middle range this week. We'll get to the main event and whatnot later on, but how are you going to handle it? Because I think, we rarely have fights that are at the same price point, 8,200 for two fighters. That's an interesting dynamic. And I've been playing this game a very long time, just like, a lot of people out there. It's weird. People don't like playing people at the same price tag. I don't know, philosophy wise, the brain doesn't like to do that, Squirrel.
Yeah, it's easier because like one of the 8,000 fighters is JJ Aldrich, who I just like don't like playing.
X.
So
Just
yeah,
X out
so
of every slate, unless it's against Nali Yang last time.
yeah, but yeah, she I guess what was her last fight? Um,
Nali Yang in
yeah,
China.
okay. Um, so yeah, I'm not a fan of Aldrich, but main event, I think you've got to have a piece. I mean, I have a lot of Grant Dawson. Yeah, he's my highest owned fighter on the slate, I believe. And it's really tough to get away from him because, like with the 5 round fights, the possibility is always like, well, a second or third round finish doesn't really get you anything more than another fight. But Grant Dawson like has an ability to put up points, and like in a win, which is likely to happen, very likely to happen. He's going to probably put up points whether it's a second round win, third round win, first round win. So I'm not hitting the lock button or anything, but yeah, I mean, right around that 50 something percent ownership.
I think if Joe Pfeiffer wasn't around him, you probably would consider a lock button. He's almost up in that like Amanda Nunez type territory, right? Remember when Amanda would always be so expensive? She obviously was an action fighter. Dawson an action fighter. You're going to lock in a great floor, and I think it's somewhat of an unknown ceiling, But then Joe Pfeiffer right here, man, this is one of those fights where it's like decision making. Do you start lineup building with Dawson and Pfeiffer? Then it lets you really have to decide because then you're going to have to kind of take a punty type stance down below and then live in that middle range. I think that might be a popular build, Dawson, Pfeiffer, and then decide from there.
I think so. I mean, I think that's the way most people are going to start their lineups. And so that's kind of resulted in me being pretty underweight on Joe Pfeiffer. I don't like it. It's scary. I kind of ended up a little bit overweight on Drew Dober just because he has a reputation for not really putting up points. But I think this is a matchup where he probably can. I mean, he's got first round finish odds that aren't that much worse than Joe Pfeiffer's. So yeah, kind of ending up overweight Drew Dober, underweight Pfeiffer. Like not thrilled
It's
about it,
terrifying.
but hopefully it works out. We do, there's two things going on value wise. One is that the really cheap guys are not appealing at all,
Mm-hmm.
just because the guys up top have such strong odds. The guys at the bottom have much worse odds. But then we also we have a fight where the line flipped, so we got Alexander Hernandez there as some value, at least like
Terrifying. It's not a good day when Alex Hernandez is a value play that is supposed to win and everyone's going to click. Now, I will say, do you think that there's any potential that we can pay up and get a leverage against him? Say he spends himself after that first round. If Algeo wins, I bet you he takes over late, and that probably means he's going to score well down the stretch once he gasses out. If he gets
exactly. So I'm write my article every week on the the takedowns, the underdogs that I like the most. I think Algeo was my most expensive underdog that I've ever put on the in the article. But I've got more Algeo than Alexander Hernandez just for that reason, that the line is flipped and that kind of draws our attention to it, but it's actually not that wild of a line movement. It just moved from 52-48 in favor of Algeo to 52-48 in favor of Hernandez. So it's not some of the wild movement we've seen. I think actually Montana De La Rosa had much more line movement in her fight, against Aldrich, where now she's the favorite. That she was already the favorite when they made pricing, but it didn't start out that way. And it's gone even more in the direction of De La Rosa since the week and pricing was set.
The size for Algeo was interesting for me because if they get into the grappling stances, I could see him locking something up or using that size against Hernandez. But, I understand the movement to a certain extent. Hernandez comes out hot in the first round. Maybe it's one of those situations like I love. You know what I love betting? I love betting those guys that are going to be an underdog in that first round, turn into a favorite. You can get the underdog, the favorite at underdog odds. I like that betting long term, but this is the fantasy show, and you were alluding to it though. It's difficult to get behind. Now, would you say Maness on down? I think Vanessa you can somewhat make a case for, but Maness on down, man, it is difficult. I mean, Maness is probably the only one. I imagine you have to play Bobby Green, right? Just due to the fact that 5 rounds can take over late, potentially hurt Dawson throughout the fight. And I guess Rookie Glenn's path is hurt him early, often. Al Hassan. I guess there's upside, right? I'm shaking my head even saying it, but it's difficult to get behind those guys.
Yeah, just the guys below Maness, you mean?
Yeah.
I'm ending up way overweight on Al Hassan, and there is some odds sense to it that if he's got a 23% chance to win. I think it's maybe 12 or so in the first round. He's probably going to score well on a win. He should be owned way more than 12%. It's really difficult to click on.
It is.
You see a guy that's only going to win 1 out of every 4 or 5 times. It's difficult to put that in your lineups and put a lot of money behind it. But the math is telling you that's some of the best leverage you're going to get on the slate. So I'm ending up with a lot of him. Even more so than Bobby Green and Ricky Glenn. I think Nate Maness is probably going to be a little popular.
I think he would be.
Yeah.
People
I think he'll come in over that 20%.
Listen, Nate cuts weight. He's chinny. It's not a good combo for him. And I think that makes Mendonca a very interesting play because he could be the highest scorer on the whole entire slate. I say that seriously because say Pfeiffer gets a second round finish, Dawson doesn't, it's a tempered first round and he doesn't score well. If Mendonca gets 2 knockdowns or a knockdown into control time and then submits him or something deep into the first, he could definitely be a very interesting GPP upside play. And I don't think people are going to go there. And then Murata right there as well is a very interesting one because this is the classic Baby Shark versus Polyana Viana, if you remember that fight. Polyana Viana pulled guard. We had top control for an almost 15 minutes in that fight, Squirrel. I could see Vanessa try to play that guard game. Now, it's scary to say this, but Vanessa might have a better guard game. And I think she could finish at any time against Murata. Murata broke her arm last time out, might be a little bit nervous of that. But it's kind of terrifying that I might get behind Vanessa Demopoulos again.
Yeah, so Liam, was picking her to win the fight, on the Ground and Pound podcast. And, I listened to his stuff that he does on YouTube as well. And he's all over Demopoulos this week. And he makes a strong technical argument that she can get the armbar. That the way that Murata likes to get her takedowns is going to leave her susceptible to an armbar. And if Demopoulos gets the win, I mean, at 7,300, that's going to give her a strong shot of being on the winning lineup. And something that we've talked about in the past, the possibility that if all of the favorites win and we have like stronger favorites than we normally do, the possibility that a 3-round loss, is it possible she's putting up enough points to land on the winning lineup? Now,
she might be on her
not
back.
necessarily that. She's not a high-paced fighter, right? Like I'd rather like a high-paced volume striker.
Belbeta is the play if you're scripting for that.
Yeah, and Belbeta is actually somebody whose odds have improved throughout the week as well. She's 300 more. So that's actually, I was kind of deciding for my article, right, whether I was going to go with Belbeta or Demopoulos, and I ended up with Belbeta because I think Liam, has kind of spoken enough to Demopoulos. But yeah, I think the same dynamic is in play there. That's kind of a high striking volume matchup. I like that fight probably a lot more than the Aldrich De La Rosa fight. If I have to pick one of the women's, low level fights.
I mean, there's some low level fights, and then there's that Belbeta and Karolkiewicz, man, that one I shake my head at because I could see 150 to 200 strikes and somebody scoring a ton of points. That's like a floor type fight, which is scary because you want ceilings. But I mean, Carolina actually grappled last time out, Squirrel. That's the other side of it. Like, what happens if one of these girls goes for takedowns? I think there's more possibility that it busts than one of these has a 30-27. I think I have to say that, right?
Yeah, I mean, there is none of these fights like strikes me. None of the women's fights like strikes me as really sneaky upside. But I think it's the volume striking with Carolina and Belbeta that it would probably make me want to go like most to a women's fight. I have a little bit of Montana De La Rosa as well. I think she's getting some like win equity. Yeah, as Aldrich's odds.
That's why the dynamic is very odd in this range. And 8,200, you got two fighters, you got one almost a reverse value out of Pick'em, and Montana's like minus 170 or so last time I checked. It's very interesting, but she's never been a fantasy scorer, and she's got somebody in front of her who slows the pace down even more. So it's really kind of terrifying unless she's getting like clinch work and getting that sneaky little scoring against the cage. I think that could be very good for her. But I mean, I think you and I can agree we'd rather go to like an Ian Cutelaba fight than one of the women's fights.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's actually, probably the fight that might have the best chances of ending inside the distance. Cutelaba, I think, is going to be really highly owned, and that's actually making me overweight on Felipe Lins. But I'm not fading Cutelaba by any stretch because I think that's what you want. So you want first round equity. You want a fight where two guys are just kind of maybe sauced up and just, heading out there and gonna just wail on each other. I think Cutelaba is probably the one more likely to fade. So that could that means like either of these guys could put up a huge score. Like if Cutelaba gets that first round finish, like that's going to be a big score. If it's Lins that's getting the finish, after Cutelaba kind of wears down his gas tank, then he could be getting those strikes at the end, right? Like when those count too. While he's pursuing the finish. So I think that this fight could be very high scoring. Like the winner of this fight could has a very good chance of ending on the winning lineup.
Fade at your own risk because it is Ian Cutelaba. He can get disqualified. He can gas out. He can put up 100 million points in the first. All options are on the table for that. Now, make sure you guys are smashing the like button. We are 15 minutes out. Got our eyes on some news, making sure everything's good. 11 fights still intact. But this show is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel Sportsbook. Get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you bet $5 for new users. And prepare yourself. Here comes the long list. Arizona, Colorado, Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Kansas, Louisiana, Maryland, Massachusetts, Michigan, New Jersey, New York, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, Virginia, West Virginia, and Wyoming. Terms and conditions apply. Must be 21 plus. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. And I actually don't even know where I'd go for like a freebie type of bet on this one. I mean, I almost wish that Ian Cutelaba was the underdog so I could do that little, sprinkle on him and then take it back on the other side. But anything from that side of stuff, I know you don't really bet, but I mean, there's some interesting stuff on this card. I mean, I like Vanessa. Like if she wins the first round, she's the type that could become, a favorite by the second round.
Yeah, I would actually say Demopoulos to win, and I would look at her submission number as well because that's probably her path to victory.
Yeah.
And then probably Felipe Lins by submission is why I haven't bet it. I tend to wait on my UFC betting until I see how DFS is going, and then gives me a chance to like maybe hedge the main event. But yeah, the Felipe Lins by submission number was something that I heard kind of talked up. I know it was
6-7-1.
7-1, like that's pretty good. Because like you don't know how like once Cutelaba, maybe expends his cardio, like that's definitely a way that Lins could get his win. So that might be a number you would want to look at. Like both kind of long shot bets, but have a reasonable path to victory.
Yeah, I think that it should be an interesting card from a live vantage point. But there's another guy, okay, that we have not talked about that has the best highlight knockout of all time. I'm going to say it. It is the best knockout, is it not? Joaquin Buckley. They're like, here you go. Here's an old guy in Alex Morono. But Alex Morono has been schooling the young kids. Hardened veteran here. Inside the distance line, clearly backs Buckley minus 110. Like, I think he's a great upside play, but you've got to know what you're signing up for. This is not quite as bad as Derek Lewis levels of slow paced, but it sniffs pretty slow. When he's striking at distance, it's not the best in the world. Now, this is the case where I think Morono actually has sneaky win equity down second, third round, winning rounds. But I also think that it's hard to ignore. Buckley could knock him out at any time. So it's like, how do I really handle this one, Squirrel?
Well, I think it's a good fight to target. And I think you can target either side. I've got a little bit more Buckley than Morono, but probably over the field on Morono. Just because I think this is another fight that could score well. You can kind of remove maybe some of the lower paced women's fights that we were talking about, and there's only 11 fights on the card. So that kind of gives you an idea of the fights you should be targeting. I like either of these fights. I think it's lined appropriately. So I don't have like a strong take that I think Morono's like a great underdog pick or anything like that. I'm seeing him with about a 33% chance. 38% implied win odds. That seems about right, but I think I don't know if he's going to hit 38% ownership at his price. He
doesn't score very well.
Yeah. But I guess, at 7,500, he doesn't necessarily need to score that well. He's got some 100-point wins there a while ago, but he doesn't strike me as somebody who's necessarily going to score particularly poorly. And again, his last win was maybe 85 points, so that's probably enough at 7,500, or at least it may be enough especially if more of the favorites win than we're expecting. Then you're some kind of running out of the underdog options that are cheaper that could put Morono in the winning lineup.
Yeah, and it's terrifying, but I'm more apt to fade that particular fight because if it goes to a decision, I don't know what it's going to look like. And then there's a middle range fight that I am still scratching my head at. Akiri Lang and Johnny Munoz, man. This one is the line has stayed the same. And I imagine a lot of people want to get behind a guy like Munoz. And I'm so confused why it's been a straight pick 'em the whole entire week, Squirrel. You have a guy in Johnny Munoz who actually is favored to win inside the distance. This is the classic case where I like investing long-term in a guy like Munoz, who's plus 175 inside the distance compared to his opponent, who's plus 225. It's basically because you're just getting those extra metrics behind you when you're making that pick. He's got wrestling. He's got the way that he can, get a submission. But Akiri Lang is almost Achilles' heel. I see why the line has continued to be pretty close. It's like these guys are both somewhat different styles of wrestling. Could we see the, point at each other? We just kickbox for 3 rounds of of boringness. It's a very odd fight for the context of this particular slate.
Yeah, so it's so weird to see this fight. Like usually, you see a lot of fights that are kind of evenly lined at the beginning of the week. Usually somebody like separates himself a little bit. This one still 50-50. Almost on almost every book is almost exactly 50-50. I think Munoz is probably going to get more ownership. So that's putting me more on a Richie Ling. But I do think Munoz will probably score a little bit better. I think he's more likely to get like takedowns. I don't know. I'm going with a Richie Ling, and it's really just more of an ownership thing than anything else. But I'm curious to see the ownership on this one. Sometimes I think people will go away from a fight like this because it's just so hard to tell. Yeah, because you really have no idea who's going to win this one. The pricing dynamics on this card maybe made it a little bit more likely people will want to go to the mid range. But yeah, so I'm kind of curious to see the ownership. But I'm overweight on a Richie Ling, but I don't feel great about it.
My gut says the same exact thing. You and I are reading this card the same. I think people are more apt to not play this fight than play it because, you've got a money line at the same time. Montana is a better money line play. It's going to be weird if people take the safe route or if they want to go for more upside, and it makes 100% sense to me. Now, I think we pretty much hit everybody, but I do want to get on that other. I want to nail home this point. Even though I'm on Vanessa like you, I still think Murata is at 8,900 is somewhat of an interesting play, because if she's going to do her takedowns, which she's probably going to go for, and if Vanessa's more than content with going on her back, there's actually going to be a potential for a lot of scoring here. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think so. It's really tough to get to her because there's so many other fighters in that range that I like more. So she's the one that I probably like the least. And my concern is that she just gets one of those submissions. I mean, we're looking at guys like Pfeiffer, Dover, Dawson, that kind of expect almost to put up 100 points in a win. Whereas does Murata maybe just get the takedown and submission without getting a whole bunch of control time, not a whole lot of ground and pound? So I'm worried. And she's fairly expensive at 8,900. So I'm a little bit worried about her scoring well. But then again, I think she's probably going to be the least owned in this range as well. So you're kind of playing with fire.
I wish it was like 15%. I got to be honest.
Yeah.
The extra 10% is scary that she's 25% owned. That's why I think you really can't go too crazy with that play.
Yeah, and I mean, we've seen with the Dudakova fight, right, where her opponent, was it Estela Nunez, just fell down and dislocated her elbow. And that's a tremendous score. You never know how these things are really going to play out. I mean, I guess we just saw last week, was it Cody Durden just getting hit in the back of the head, and that's a legal strike, and suddenly he's the one with the first round, medical disqualification win.
Don't remind me. I don't.
Or not medical, but first round win. So yeah, you never know how these things are going to play out. So yeah, Murata is in there. I mean, if she, especially if some of the more favored fighters falter, you see a little bit more upsets. If Murata does get a 92, 93 point win, then she could be the one on the winning lineup.
I just thought going into this, Vanessa would be higher owned than Maness. You and I thought Maness would be popular, but I think that play isn't there because of it. I guess you'd have to be more up to take Mendonca than Murata, I guess. It's just frustrating. Very frustrating slate from a game theory standpoint.
Yeah, I never I never try to get too far into picking a winner, right? The Vegas odds generally are pretty accurate, especially just the fight lines themselves, the money lines. But Maness has looked so awful. I think this is his second time cutting down to flyweight. I think he just looks very drawn on the scales. So it's a little bit concerned. I think other people are seeing the same thing. I think the line since weigh-ins has moved a little bit in favor of Mendonca. So I'm trying to be overweight Mendonca just because I do think Maness could really falter here, and I think he is going to be somewhat popular. I think he'll maybe have more than 20% ownership.
Yeah.
So I think there could be some leverage there.
Definitely.
Mike, I'm weak. I did it. I'm weak. I put a lineup in, and so here's the question: Is it Madonka or Dober as my last piece?
Oh, shit. It's like Dober is so frustrating. Squirrel can attest to it because he doesn't do anything until he knocks his opponent out.
I'll say that you should keep in mind that this is a little bit like Showdown because like you want to avoid duplication. It's like NFL Showdown and UFC are the two ones you really want to avoid duplication. And if you have the price to get Dober, but you're choosing Mendonca instead, like that's going to make you less duplicated probably.
I say the ceiling. They both have the same opponent that have been chinny. So yeah, I agree. Mendonca also has sneaky grappling. I think there could be grappling in that. So you're building that in as well.
There it is.
Whereas Dober's just going to be striking. He's just going to be like. Also, let me tell you, TJ, Drew Dober has a huge chin. Let's just Squirrel. You know, you've seen it. He's got a huge chin. Handsome fella, real handsome, but a very hittable face. So we are we are minutes out. Everything holding steady, boys. But yeah, I think. Final thoughts here, Squirrel, because there is money to be made out there this week. You made a good point.
Yeah, exactly. There's money to be made. There's some big cards coming up. But yeah, I mean, this one should have some high scores. We get a lot of like first round finish odds. So, and yeah, keep in mind like the live betting. And yeah, some of the underdogs, like maybe a Demopoulos win. Look at the prop bets, like the Felipe Lins by submission. Getting some pretty good odds on that. So yeah, just enjoy the Saturday fights.
Absolutely enjoy the fights. We will see you guys next week for Yusuf versus Barbosa. 11 fights again. Don't like that, but like the quality of fights a little bit better than this week. So we'll see you guys next week.